I was talking about the older jars being difficult to vacuum seal, and I wanted to clarify that just a little bit. It is true that the thickness of the glass jars is thicker, and that may have something to do with the jar not wanting to seal. And the other thing is this little shoulder or lip that sticks out here. If you screw your band on, and there's this glass ridge here on the newer jars, there's really not a shoulder there. And then now this jar I was able to seal, and it does have a shoulder, but it's not as thick. It doesn't stick out from the edge of the jar, the side of the jar, as much as it does on the old green mason jars or ball jars. So, and because of that, when you place your vacuum sealer lid on there, what happens is that this rests against that shoulder, and it actually should seat down and go down just a little bit further, and it doesn't. So it doesn't allow it to seal. Now, on the clear jars that are older, that have this shoulder but still isn't as pronounced as the green jar, the way I got that to seal is by stacking up two of the lids together and placing it on, and then I sealed it. And then sometimes you can easily pry that top lid off and the bottom one will be sealed, and sometimes the two of them get stuck together and vacuum down together pretty tight. Occasionally I can't get the top one off without breaking the seal completely, but many times I can get those apart. So sometimes that is helpful, so that's a little tip. And on the jars that I'm not able to vacuum seal, you can go ahead and put your oxygen absorber into the jar, and that oxygen absorber will help create a vacuum in that jar and can help that jar to seal. And my oxygen absorbers, when I buy a bag of those, I immediately get them into a jar and I vacuum seal it. And the oxygen absorbers usually come with this this little sensor, and when this pink dot turns blue, I know that these absorbers are no longer good. And so when I usually open this jar and I pull out several at once to use, and I have to be quick about sealing the jars back. And you can see this jar of carrots, you can see that oxygen absorber here on the top of that. I don't put it in all of my jars. It depends on what it is and how much moisture they might absorb throughout the humid months of the summer and things like that. And it depends on how quickly I use what's in the jar also. And I also wanted to mention that if you check yard sales and places like Craigslist, you can oftentimes find canning jars at a reasonable price. Sometimes they're priced at about half of what you would pay retail, and sometimes they're really good buys. For instance, these jars, which are 3/4 and 1 cup jars, I think I paid 10 cents a piece for these from a yard sale, which was posted on Craigslist. So I was able to contact the seller and have them set these jars aside for me, and then I went and picked them up, and they were 10 cents a jar. The other thing about the jars is you can use different jars to vacuum seal in. They don't have to necessarily be a canning jar. This jar that these mung beans are in, it is a mason jar, but this is one that I think originally held a jar of spaghetti sauce. Okay, so the lids that are made like this, that are the mason jars, it says it's an Atlas Mason. This one may actually be a full quart. It looks like it is. This one is not a full quart. It's a little bit shy. So occasionally, if I buy spaghetti sauce, which isn't often, I'll look for the spaghetti sauce in the canning jars if I need the jar. So that's a little tip there also. Here now this has a different lid. You can still it's still possible to vacuum seal with other lids, but I want to show you the difference. So right here at the get-go, you can see that the edge of this lid is solid and smooth, where this one you can see the ridges in it, like you do on the band of a canning jar. So you know those are the same, that has the same type of top. But the way this is made, the way the threads are made on this jar, you cannot get a standard canning jar lid and ring to fit on there. Okay, so be aware of that. That won't work, but you can use it to vacuum. Should be able to use it to vacuum seal with. But I'll put the link for I'm Still Workin's video on that. That was a real good video. I learned something new. When you vacuum seal, they recommend to not use the canning jar ring. And the reason for that is if you tighten this down, you can actually cause that seal to break. Okay? Sometimes I'll have a jar where the seal may keep popping loose on me, and if it does that, I may put my ring on here, but I don't tighten it down tight. I just put it on there so that if I happen to pick the jar up and that seal is busted, that I'm not going to toss seed or whatever dried food all over the pantry. But that happens, that's kind of a rare occasion. And the other thing that I like to do, most of the things that I dry, I don't put a label on it. However, a lot of times, I didn't on this one. Most of the time I'll put the month and year that I dried the food and place that someplace on the jar. And then there's a few things that I go ahead and put a label on, because I may have things that look alike, say things like cornstarch and arrowroot and things like that that look alike. I'll label those. And in this case I have some lentils, and I go ahead and label that because I know what they are, but other members of my family may not have a clue, and so it's just good to do in some cases. I have my little Dymo machine, and I use this to label things all over my house, in my sometimes in the pantry, certain pantries that I have, or closets, in my craft room. This is just something I have and use on a regular basis. So I also occasionally use it to make a label and place on my jar. And in this case, I have a clear plastic label, which I like to use on these jars instead of using there's a white label that you can use instead because it blends in. But I also put the label at the bottom so that as I use the product out of the jar, I can still easily read what's in this jar. If you have a food saver machine, chances are you have a port that will take this hose, where you can use that hose, and you connect one end to your food saver and one end to your canning jar sealing lid, and then you run your vacuum sealer and you're able to seal the jar. But there are some videos out there on that already. And this is for a regular size jar, a regular lid, and this is the wide mouth. And you can sometimes buy them in sets or you can buy them individually. Okay, I went ahead and I placed this into my 2-quart canister and attached my hose, and I sealed my canister. Now, once my canister seals, I go ahead and release the tube. My jar's in there and it's sealed. And I go ahead and depress the button, and that will let the air come out. And as this air begins to escape, as I break the seal on the canister and I'm able to open it, as that air escapes, then this jar lid will actually vacuum seal at that time. And I thought I better go ahead and make sure that this particular lid will seal easily. So I put this in my canister and it sealed just fine. You could hear that that was sealed. And then I went ahead with my jar of matches. This lid is smaller than a regular mouth lid. You can see that. So that I also placed down into my 2-quart canister and sealed it. And that seals just fine. Okay. Now some of my dried, dehydrated product I will use a plastic lid with on, especially my old, the green ball jars. And years ago, what we used to do, mayonnaise used to come in a glass jar, which we could use those to can with, but we would take the old mayonnaise lids and save those, and then we would use those as a refrigerator jar lid, and that, you know, came in really handy. This used to have a piece of like cardboard in it, and I would just remove that. Now there's a piece of plastic. It's kind of a silicone kind of material, and I haven't removed this one. I'm not sure what the way they're making the new lids, whether or not I would remove all of them or not. I would be concerned about getting food underneath there between that. But this will certainly seal up a little bit better because of having this little gasket in there. So for years we did that, and you can, you know, they come in various colors, and this also works. This is some slaw dressing, and this is a regular size lid, which is very much like the ball lids that you can buy at the store. This is a really nice lid to reuse. So if you don't reuse the jar, which oftentimes I'll reuse this jar also, but if for some reason you don't, you can keep that lid and use that for your regular size if you find those types of items in the store. Now, Ball makes a lid that they came out with, I don't know, a few years ago, and I think this year the box is green and last year it was white, or vice versa. I'm not sure, but they've changed their label a little bit. But you can find these in most of the big box stores and grocery stores. So that's a regular and a wide mouth, and I like these a lot. These are they're made better. They're heavier plastic than these that come on the mayonnaise jars now. They have a nicer feel to them because they're thicker and heavier. But any of those will work well, and they're great for storing in the refrigerator, or when I make my freezer jam, I go ahead and usually put that into a glass jar and put the plastic lid on that and place that in my freezer instead of using plastic. So I'll place the link for I'm Still Working, for the video I was referring to earlier, down in the description box down there, so that you can go watch that, because that's a good video to watch. She's got some really good tips on that video, and I'll talk to you later.